So page 17, you had to do the left side for homework, and I just now asked you to do the right side. Were there any you absolutely know you struggled with? So, like, I know a whole bunch of you already were struggling with Utica. I also struggled with Utica. The problem with Utica is when you follow Utica up using, apparently, I got rid of my ruler. When you follow Utica up using a ruler, it is going to be somewhere along this line, which could be the Allegheny Plateau. It could be this little section that is part of the Hudson Mohawk lowlands, or it could be the Tug Hill Plateau, like longitude wise. And it is really hard for me to match up Utica. There is like not much like in the way of landmarks to look at. Like there's no lakes, no nothing. But what I do see is it is at like where Niagara River over here kind of curved. So I did my best. And I do think Utica is in the Tug Hill Plateau. However, if you said Allegheny Plateau or the Hudson Mohawk lowlands for Utica, I'll take any of those. And let me just tell you, the Regents won't ask you about Utica. They will stick with ones that are clearly in like the Allegheny Plateau or clearly in the Erie, Ontario lowlands, or even like something that's obvious. Even Oswego, were you able to tell me Oswego's landscape region? Okay, so that one is the Erie, Ontario lowlands. It is real close. So Oswego, you can see, is right there. So Oswego's about right here, which is real close to the Tug Hill Plateau, but Oswego is literally right on the lake. You can see that here, that it is just right off the coast of Lake Ontario. So everywhere on the coast is considered the Erie, Ontario lowlands. That's one that they might give you, but I really have never would anticipate them giving you something like Utica, which is in this hot mess of stuff. Same with like Albany that we did yesterday. It was really hard to see where it was over here. I don't think they'd give you that one or any in this mess of different areas down here. So they're not that mean. Even though I call them big old jerk faces, they're not flat out mean. So let's go through the answers. If you made a couple mistakes, I'm sure it was not that you were clueless, just that you maybe were going a little fast. So here are the answers. We've got the Hudson Mohawk lowlands, the Allegheny Plateau for Binghamton, Buffalo's in the Erie, Ontario lowlands, Elmira, Ithaca, and Jamestown, all the Allegheny Plateau, Kingston's in the Catskills. We've got Messina in the St. Lawrence lowlands, Mount Marcy in the Adirondack Mountains. New York City, that's another one. I put that it's in the Manhattan Prong. You could have also said probably the Newark lowlands or even the Hudson Highlands, depending on where you thought New York City matched up with. So don't worry about that one. Connecticut, Massachusetts, they're in the New England province. And New Jersey, again, I said the Newark lowlands if it was here, but it could have also been any of these. So Taconic Mountains or the Hudson Mohawk lowlands. Niagara Falls, Erie, Ontario, Old Forge, Adirondacks, Oswego, Erie, Ontario, Plattsburgh, Champlain Lowlands, Riverhead, the Atlantic Coastal Plain, Rochester, Erie, Ontario, Slidemount, Catskills, Syracuse, Erie, Ontario, Utica, so like I was saying, Allegheny Plateau, Tug Hill, or even the Hudson Mohawk Lowlands. Watertowns in the Erie, Ontario, Pennsylvania's in the Appalachian Plateau, Vermont is the New England province, and Long Island is the Atlantic coastal plain. Any that you disagree with? I know I just went through that fast. Any that you do not agree with? One thing I did notice was a problem, and this is why I asked you to grab a highlighter, is I did notice yesterday and then already this morning that people weren't recognizing that like where New York was on this map. So what I'd like you to do with your highlighter is we're going to highlight the outline of New York. Now, there are a couple of symbols that might be helpful when doing this. A dash with two dots, that's a state boundary. So like down here where New York and Pennsylvania meet, going around here down to where New Jersey goes. That is all a state boundary. I do not know why they did not include any boundary along Long Island, but go ahead and circle Long Island as well. And then you can go up the state line. So this is still more state lines separating New York from Connecticut, Massachusetts, and careful up here. Do not follow that black line, follow the dotted line. So that's that part. This way? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't include one around Long Island. So just go ahead and include Long Island in your. This is where it gets hairy up here. Now, this is now switches from a state boundary. This is now an international boundary. Why is it an international boundary up here? Because that's Canada north of this line. So I still want to follow it along here because that is, I wanted to outline New York State. So just go ahead and finish your boundary around New York State. I think that helps see what's going on. Like I had a lot of people say, well, where is Pennsylvania? And Pennsylvania then would be south of this line here. So this is Pennsylvania here. So I hope that helps. Do you want to add that to this one too, or do you guys see New York easy enough on this one? Okay, now one other thing that I might not have pointed out is, have you noticed the polka dots and the stripes and the diagonals and the squiggle lines? And if you notice, I haven't talked about them at all. We're not going to use those. So what they do tell you is they tell you the types of rocks. So whether it's a sedimentary rock or a metamorphic rock, and these words tell you how old those rocks are. We won't use that until chapter 6. So if you are feeling the need to look at those, don't. Just ignore this whole part of the map for now. That has nothing to do with landscape regions. All right, any issues finding the easy ones at least for landscape regions? Okay. Now remember how I said your map skills were a little sketchy compared to like that I was expecting? I said that a couple weeks ago after I gave you those practice problems and nobody knew how to read a map. Now it's going to be the time where we're going to be looking a little bit at making sure you can read and use maps. So I want to answer. So McKenna already asked me this. Are we doing the questions on the bottom? Now we are. So there are 8 questions here that I think we can do these mostly together. We already talked about the elevation marks on Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Can you guys find them and fill them in? So latitude, the elevation, not latitude. Lake Erie and Lake Ontario are the only places that mention elevation. So Lake Erie, what do you got for Lake Erie's elevation? 175, and those are meters, and that means meters above sea level. So just in case you're curious, what is the sea level over here on the coast of Long Island? 0. How do I know that sea level is 0 or the elevation is 0 over here? What is sea level? It's the level of the sea. So this is the ocean is the sea. So anytime you have ocean touching land, the elevation will be 0. It only applies to ocean though. It doesn't apply to lakes. So this has an elevation of 0 meters. And by the time you get over here, Lake Erie's at 175 and Lake Ontario is much lower at 75 meters. How about the rivers? You guys want to call out rivers and I'll keep track of them? Niagara River, right there. That's 1. St. Lawrence River, that's 2. Genesee River, 3. Hudson River, be careful. It is labeled twice. So there is the Hudson here, and then it follows down here. It's the same river, but labeled twice. That's 4. Delaware, somewhere down here. Delaware, right there. That's 5. The Susquehanna right there, and that makes 6. and the Mohawk right there. That makes 7. Those are the only 7 rivers labeled on this map. Does that mean there are only 7 rivers in New York State? No, just to be clear, there are more, but they only ask you about these 7. So they only give you these 7. So these are the only ones they'll ever ask you about. So like there will never be a question on the Regents about the Cattaraugus River because it's Cattaraugus Creek technically. But they won't ask about it because it's not on the map. How about the map scale? First of all, what's a map scale for? First of all, what is the map scale? Where is it? Point to it. Bottom corner. This is the map scale. If you needed a label, go ahead and label it. And what do we use this map scale for? To find miles or kilometers, which is distance. A map scale is for distance. Now they have both miles and kilometers on the same one. They both work the same way. So make sure if they're asking about miles, you do miles. And if you're asking about kilometers, you do kilometers. But for this, what's the largest miles that are listed? 50. And what is the largest kilometers? 80. Now I want to do, what is the straight line distance from Buffalo to Elmira? And I am not going to let you guys do this however, which way you want. You have to do it my way. How are you about to do it?
Like a pencil or finger?
Pencil and your finger, not allowed. Some of you wanted to use a ruler, which might work, might be pretty accurate, but it's going to involve math. And I've seen you guys do math this year. It's not so great. Especially that easy math, like those really adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. Those have been throwing people off. Here is a scratch sheet of paper. Do you guys know how to use a scratch sheet of paper to use the map scale?
No.
Nope, it's really easy. No math required, no tip of your pencil to like create an optical illusion. Here's how I want you doing that distance on a map from now on. So we want to do from Buffalo to Elmira. So put your paper, and I'm also going to recommend not using the very edge of your paper, so not the corner. Put your paper from Buffalo to Elmira. So you're just making a nice straight line from Buffalo to Elmira. Then mark off both cities. I'm going to put an E for Elmira, and I'm putting a B for Buffalo. I would also recommend, I see a few of you doing it my way, but I see some of you doing it this way, where you're using the bottom of the scrap paper. It's not wrong, but I'll tell you it's easier to use the top of the scrap paper. So doing from having the scrap paper underneath the cities. Once you have them marked, I should be able to go, and ours should match up. Like if I match up mine with yours, they should be identical, right? Because our maps are the same. So now we bring your scrap paper to the scale. And we realize that the scale is too freaking short for us. So what should we do? Mark it and move it. So I'm lining up the Buffalo mark with 0, and I'm going to put a mark here for 50. I am going to go ahead and label it. And now by moving it, if I take that 50 and I put it at the 0, now I have another 50. So instead of that being 50, this is now 100 because 2 sets of 50 is 100. And if I move it one more time, now it's not quite perfectly. Mine's a little short of the 20 mark. 19 works. That's 19 more. So already had 100. Mine's right around 119. How you estimate it, that'll be slightly different for everybody. That is the best way to use the map scale. I've seen people on the scrap paper mark the scale on the scrap paper and start moving it and marking it kind of like this, which it will work in theory, but it leaves 3 places for you to make a mistake. So copying it and moving it and marking it are those 3 different mistakes you could make. With this, it's really hard to make like really simple mistakes. So I recommend doing it this way. So speaking of, why don't you go do question 7, which is asking you for a distance from Watertown to Syracuse. So in case you can't find them, there's Syracuse right there and Watertown a little bit northeast of. I'm going dot to dot. This one wants it in kilometers though, so be careful. Did you do that one already? What'd you get? Yep, I got 99. So 97 sounds good. So it's a little bit longer than 1 map scale. Anybody not get around that? All right, and finally, what is the name of the town that they have labeled in Long Island? Riverhead. That was just to make sure you saw it over there. So that's some basic map stuff. We'll practice that a heck of a lot more. There's one new thing that we have to talk about, and we have to go back in your packet to time zones. I'm hoping you guys know there's different time zones in the world. You know that already? Do you know why there's time zones? Something about the sun. What about the sun? It is bright. Okay. So there's a couple of reasons. Let's say the earth was flat. Let's say this sheet of paper is the earth. Flat. Sun comes out. Are there time zones on Earth if the Earth is flat?
No.
Why not?
The sun covering everything.
The sun's covering the whole thing. Welcome to the round Earth, the spherical Earth, the oblate spheroid. If my hand is the sun, what's going on this side, the side facing the sun?
Right.
Sunshine, daytime. What's happening over here? Nighttime. Would you be able to say then that both times are noon? Would you like that if noon was in the middle of the night for you? It'd mess with you. So that's why they created time zones, so that everywhere you went, noon was noon. It was like it is everywhere. So if it's noon here, we got a nice bright sunshine. This is probably one of the warmest parts of the day. We want noon to be the middle of your time you're awake. Yeah.
So like, you know how like in Alaska, I think it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's like only sunny for like a couple hours.
That's only in the winter.
Yeah, but like why?
Why? We'll learn exactly why. Long story short, it has to do with tilt, revolution, and rotation, and the parallelism of Earth's axis. It's literally a whole topic we talk about. But anyway, so we want noon, but even for them, people who live in Alaska know that noon is still going to be around the brightest time of day. So even though they only get a little bit of daylight, noon is still around the brightest time of the day. So why do we have time zones? Here are the 2 bullets that are at the top of page 13. It has to do with the Earth's rotation. So the Earth rotates at a rate of 15 degrees per hour. So that's why in the morning, the sun's just coming up, and every hour we're going to move and we're going to see the sun higher in the sky. So that 15 degrees per hour is because the Earth turns once every day. So it makes a 360 turn and it takes 24 hours for that turn to happen. And that's where the time zones come in. They have placed the time zones 15 degrees apart. So there are 24 different time zones in the world. Anybody know how many different time zones we have here? Too many, is that what you said?
Like 20.
And by here, I mean Buffalo, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, in Buffalo. That's still not what I meant. Duh. United States. It's like my first day. You would love to answer, but you have no idea. There are 4 time zones in the continental United States. Alaska and Hawaii are in 2 other time zones. So they do get messed up a little bit. So here's a map of the different time zones in the United States. So I just said the time zones are 15 degrees apart, ish. So they wanted them to be perfectly 15 degrees apart. So that means it would be 0 to 15 would be one time zone. 15 to 30, another. 30 to 45, 45 to, what is it, 60? Thank you. And then 60 to 75. That would be right around here. Would have actually cut off a chunk of the most northeastern part of the United States would have been in a different time zone. So they did adjust the time zones for convenience of people. Like we wouldn't want just this little chunk of Maine to be in a different time zone than the entire rest of the country. So they fudged the lines a little bit. You'll notice that here too. These aren't perfectly straight lines. Again, they fudged them. They rearranged them for their convenience. I looked it up. Tennessee, this follows right along county lines. So that way, yes, half of Tennessee is an hour later in the day, an hour earlier in the day than the rest of Tennessee, but it does go right down county lines. But that still is weird to me because like, think of your little town, this area right here. If you lived on one side of the bridge by Tim Hortons, you'd be in one time zone. If you lived in the other side of the bridge by Tim Hortons, you'd be in a different time zone because those are 2 different counties, Erie and Cattaraugus. Same with Wyoming County and Cattaraugus County. So it still would be weird. I can't imagine living right around here where you very well might live in one time zone and work in a different time zone. That would really mess with my head. Yeah. So Canada follows these same general patterns, but again, they do adjust a little bit depending on their counties or their state line, province lines. But for the most part, if you follow this up, it'll be the same. Do you guys ever been somewhere else? Yeah? Kansas? Where the heck is Kansas? So were you 2 hours or 3, or sorry, were you 1 or 2 hours? Just 1, so you were in this major part of Kansas. Do you remember, did you have to turn your clocks back? Were they earlier in the day or later in the day? They were earlier in the day. Do you guys know the phrase, like if I said something about, have you ever seen a Western movie or been to a old Western town? What can you expect in places like those? Tumbleweeds? How do they get around in the old Westerns? Horse and buggies? What I'm getting at is old Westerns or an old Western town, you go back in time when you go to places that are in the Old West. Same is true here. When you go west, so when you travel from the east and travel west, you go back in time. And you can see that up here. For us, it is 12:37 right now. As we go west, it goes back in time. It's only 11, 10:30, 9:30. In fact, my brother lives way over here in Oregon. It is 9:30 a.m. for him. So he's 3 hours back in time compared to us.
Wait, when you travel to your phone?
Your phones automatically change now. At least mine does. I don't know if it's a setting, but mine did change. But I had to wait till I got off the airplane and out of airplane mode for it to switch.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a setting either. So anyway, what we need to put in our notes for time zones. We only have like 2 minutes, so we have to go kind of quickly. Sorry. So this is everything you need right there where it says, if you go east, you go ahead 1 hour per meridian. Example, it's later in the day in London. They're 5 hours later than us. If you go west, you go back in time. California, it's still the morning there. And when you cross 180, you actually change days. It goes from being to today to being tomorrow. Or if you're going the other way, it goes from being today to yesterday.
Isn't it Australia? Isn't it the next day in Australia?
Yeah, it's like 13 hours.
I don't know the answer to that, so hang on one moment. Australia is across the international date line from us, yes. So it's already tomorrow in Australia. It is really, no, I don't like it either. When the Olympics were in Japan, they were truly a whole day ahead of us. So when they like it was already the next day for them. You have homework. It is pages 11 and 12. It's the 2 pages before where we're working right now. It's the multiple choice, front and back. It is multiple choice. There's 18 of them though. So it is a little more than I normally give you for homework. So please plan accordingly. Good, good. If we had stayed on topic, we might have gotten time.